All right, everybody, welcome back to the Heath Barn. This episode is another part one of a two-parter. It's episode 129. It is with Dave Wischnowsky. He is someone that has been a writer for the Chicago Tribune. He also did some work for CBS Sports Chicago. He is an avid Illini fan, and he is also an avid Chicago Cubs fan. I talk about the Cardinals on here quite a bit, so I thought, hey, I'll be nice to I'll give the Cub fans some love, possibly. So he came on. He was great, man. And this first part that I'm putting out tonight is just Illinois talk and college basketball talk. He talks about his background, things like that. Then we get into Illinois, and we talk about Illinois this episode. Then part two, that will come out Thursday, is all Cards Cubs. So this is the first part with Dave Wischnowsky. Again, episode 129. We talk about the Fighting Illini past and present. So he's great. Very, very knowledgeable, and was a great guest. So this is part one, and again, part two, Cards Cubs, comes out Thursday, and that one was a hoot. So enjoy this one. Thank you very much for listening, and hit it. Okay, here we are. Dave, thanks a lot for being here.
It's great being on with you, John.
Yes, and as we just said right before this, we are not in front of each other, so this is fun.
We're doing this remote. Good. We got long distance talk. I love it.
I know. I'm growing technologically. But the thing is, though, this is so okay. Honestly, I was out there with my wife doing it, and it is so simple, but after like 2 times, she knew exactly what I needed to do, and I had to do it about 8 times just to make sure that I knew. And I'm still not sure. We may get done, and I might hit the wrong button, but I'm sure it's going to be fun. But yeah, I'm glad you came on. Something that I was thinking about with you that might be fun to have you on after on Facebook and stuff. We added each other, and then I kind of started looking into your background, and you love Illinois and you love the Cubs, and there's a pretty good percentage of my pods are about the Cardinals because I'm a diehard Cardinal fan. So I said, well, right, let's get something from the other side, and so it'll be fun for us to talk about all that stuff. However, to start off with, if you're good with this, can you maybe just give the audience a little background on you and the jobs you've had, things like that, and we can kind of go from there if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm Dave Wischnowsky, and I'm a Illinois boy, lifelong. Grew up in Bourbonnais. Went to college at U of I. Graduated in 1998. I live in Chicago now, up about 1.5 miles from Wrigley Field. But my background, I think most people know me as my background in journalism. Originally, and I started my career. I wrote for the News Gazette down in Champaign during college for a couple of years. Worked part-time there. I was a sports writer then in Ottawa, Illinois, for the Daily Times newspaper in Ottawa, and I lived in Ottawa for 7 years. I was worked my way up. I was features editor, and I wrote a column there, and I actually published a book, a collection of my columns, which were called The Wish List, to play off my last name, which is also my Twitter handle, WISCHLIST, so Wish List. In 2005, I moved from Ottawa up to Chicago and wrote for the Chicago Tribune for a couple of years. I actually was the third person to ever write a blog for the Trib back in the day, kind of helped pioneer that technology, although it wasn't appreciated as much as it should have been at the time. Worked for the Trib a couple of years. After that, got into marketing. Could kind of see the direction the newspaper industry was going, and made a transition after I left the Tribune. But I did still keep my fingers in journalism, and I wrote a sports column for CBS Chicago for 5 years. I think a lot of people probably know me from that. And I did continued to write up until 2020. I wrote a column that ran in the Ottawa newspaper, and then back home in my hometown area newspaper, the Kankakee Daily Journal, was a Chicago-centric version of my wish list column. So these days I live with my wife in West Lakeview in Chicago. I work in marketing, do writing for a bunch of different clients, but still very active on social media, and still kind of I consider journalism to kind of be my hobby these days, and staying active, especially with Illini and Cubs crowds on Twitter. But I weigh in on all sorts of things from time to time.
Right. Gotcha. So when you Bourbonnais, I have a niece and a nephew that both went to Olivet Nazarene there. All right. So whenever you were starting with the News Gazette, I guess we can start. I guess we talked a little bit before this, but you were talking about covering small towns. It's not like, Bourbonnais isn't huge, but being from up there around Chicago, was it a little bit of a shock kind of covering teeny tiny towns, things like that? Or was it, pretty easy for you, pretty natural?
It was different. I think it was pretty easy transition. It was different. I always kind of considered Bourbonnais, like we're, about 50, 60 miles south of Chicago. I always considered Bourbonnais growing up to be kind of suburbia. We weren't quite far enough north to be the suburbs, but we were suburban adjacent and similar to the suburbs, but also in a lot of farm country there, and as well too. So I had a lot of friends who were from smaller towns, people I went to church with and everything too. So I'd spent a good amount of time, in and around small towns, and totally understood the small town vibe. Because again, Bourbonnais is not a big town, but Bradley, Bourbonnais, Kankakee metro area there, if you want to call it that, that was about close to, between 50 and 60,000 people when I was growing up. And then when my junior year at Illinois, I got an opportunity to write part-time for the News Gazette, and started off covering a lot of prep sports. So a lot of prep basketball, prep football, some track and other sports as well. But that was primarily the stuff I did. So I got to know all sorts of small towns on Friday nights too, before I started going out and covering football games, or just any nights. If I was working the desk, all the small towns. I do like to talk. You and I were talking earlier just about hometowns, and I'll often meet people in Illinois and ask them where they're from. They're like, "Oh, I'm from a small town near Peoria or near Galesburg or near Bloomington or Champaign or something," and I'll be like, where actually are you from? And then they'll be shocked that I actually know their town, because I'm the first person they've ever met that knows it. But I know a lot from my time there in Champaign, originally getting introduced to going and visiting small town high schools. And I love going to small town high schools. I love small town high school sports. I think it's a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what we did. You asked where I was from, and I was like, I'm like, we're about 20 miles south of Danville, about an hour from Champaign, and then I told you exactly. So yeah. I guess I'll just ask you: would you rather start with things we agree on, or things we probably don't agree on? You want to start with Illinois, or do you want to start with Cardinals?
Yeah, let's ease into, I guess, things we agree on, and we can work our way up from there.
Yeah. So were you Illinois fan? I guess let's get into that. Was that just from the jump? Was it something that really kicked off when you got to college, or how was that?
I grew up an Illini fan. I was a fan in the 80s, and especially getting there towards the later 80s. So I was born in 1976. So, the 80s belonged to the Illini. It was a great decade. I was a little young to really get into the Rose Bowl team in 83 and everything. But my dad went to Illinois State University. He played baseball and he played basketball his freshman year there as well too. But he got his master's degree from Illinois. So we've had Illinois connections in the family. And really, once I started getting into high school, so high school started really with the Flying Illini in 89, and then moving into high school, I was a freshman in 90, was a fan of the Illini. Chris Gandy, who played basketball for the Illini in the early 90s, he was 2 years ahead of me at Bradley Bourbonnais Community High School.
Yes.
So, I was paying attention to Chris being down there and everything as well, too. And really, I always had an interest in the history of the university and the players. And then once I got to college in 94, just absolutely loved it. And that was a huge reason why I went to Illinois. visited a couple other schools, but Illinois was actually the only school I applied to, and it was really the only place I wanted to go. I really wanted that Big Ten experience, and I have such passion for the state, and just love being someone from Illinois. So I always was something that I wanted to just go to Illinois and be an Illini, and just looking forward to getting a chance to go to big sporting events and see the players that I've been watching for the previous few years, but also so much history and so much legacy from the Henson era and all the, obviously with Butkus and Grange, and just knowing about all of that as well too, growing up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's whenever you were growing up, as far as was it? Football, basketball. Are you pretty much even on both of those, or do you lean a little bit more basketball, or it's all good, everything?
I'm a big fan of both, but I'm a little bit bigger basketball fan. Always have been. I mean, I think that probably is true for a lot of Illini fans. Just obviously, Illinois had more.
Well, yeah, one's been a little bit more successful.
Exactly. We've had a little more success in basketball consistently than we have in football. Football, when we have success, it seems like it's often major spikes in success, but then immediately followed up by falling off a cliff the next season. But basketball, I love both. But I know we're going to talk about Cubs later on, but like Cubs getting World Series was my number one thing I wanted to see in my life, sporting wise. Number two, which would now be number one that I haven't seen, would be Illinois winning a national championship in basketball. I'd sure love to see it in football too, if that could possibly happen. But an Illini basketball championship would be the ultimate. It'd be amazing to see, and I think one of these days we're going to get it.
Yeah, I feel like. We'll get into like where the program stands now, but as far as like back in the 80s, because I'm just 2 years younger than you, so I mean I have about a lot of the same. Now that Rose Bowl game you're talking about, I remember I was like 5, and they just got blasted. Tony Eason, right?
Tore him up, yeah.
Yes. So, but with basketball, I go back to some of my first memories. We're talking like Ephraim Winters.
Mm-hmm.
Montgomery, Bruce Douglas, Weisinger, Altenberg, all that stuff. That's when I'm like really little, my first memories. But then when it switched over to Flying Illini, I mean, it was just everybody was completely obsessed with that, and for good reason. But do you have? Let me think here. Let's just focus on kind of like our childhoods a little bit. Do you have a favorite player from that span of time? And if you have more, you can even list like a Mount Rushmore, whatever you want to do. But do you have who were your go-to guys like back when we were kids? I should say.
I like Kendall Gill a lot, and Kenny Battle. I think those are probably the two that I liked most. I did like Nick Anderson a lot too, but I think KG and Battle were probably the two that I was the biggest fan of at that time. I didn't quite get into the Illini in the early 80s with those teams. It wasn't until the later 80s. So I mean, I know all those guys and all their history and everything, the names you're rattling off before, but it wasn't really until the latter 80s I really started getting into it. So those guys were probably my favorites when I was a kid. And then I remember being excited when Kewan Garris committed to Illinois, and I really loved Kewan during college. He was a favorite of mine when I was watching during college. And after that, Frankie Williams was someone I absolutely loved watching.
Right. Yeah. Well, with Illinois, as a fan, let's say we just take out 05. We can't even count that. Well, when you were in college, I should ask like every home game or just here and there, or how was all that while you were going?
I was there for just about every home game. I had season tickets, obviously all 4 years, and I would be there. There were a couple games I missed, but not many at all. And I was had seats up high my freshman year. Sophomore year, I was part of the Orange Crush, so I did sit lower on the floor. I didn't do that my junior year, but I had seats in B section, as it was called back then. And then my senior year, I was second row on the floor, which was awesome because Illinois, my senior year, there in 97, 98, the football team went 0-11, so that was a rough football season to say the least. But basketball made up for it with me being a senior. It was 5 senior starters that year. So you had Hester, Johnson, Heldman, Turner, and G. And seeing them win the Big Ten with 5 senior starters, with me being a senior and sitting second row on the floor was absolutely incredible. That was the most fun season I had during college. It was just, that was awesome. I remember before the season, I told one of my buddies, I said, I think Illinois got a chance to be good. This is really a veteran team. And he was like, well, maybe we'll see. And then after the season, he's like, you called it, man. You saw it. And I did see it coming, that I thought that team had a chance to really be competitive. And they
Right.
were. It wasn't a great team, but it was one of the greatest teams, I think, of Illini history. It was just and that was an awesome senior year to way to cap things off.
Well, he had Lon Kruger, right? That was him. Yeah, and he was he's a great coach. That one stung a lot whenever he left, because I just feel like he's a great coach. He's a great coach, and you get a guy like him with that veteran group, and yeah, that's a very underrated squad there. You don't talk about them a lot, but that was a great team. And who saw Turner would end up being that good? Like.
Absolutely. I mean, he was the key to them being as good as they were, because he had a fantastic season. I think he averaged like 17 points a game his senior year. And it was, Kruger did a fantastic, he was an incredible coach. He really was. I mean, Gunther did a great job with hiring him once Henson retired. And Lon, I thought Lon, right when he came in, we were speaking about Chris Gandy before. Chris had kind of had a disappointing basketball career until his fifth year, because Hansen tried to turn Gandy into like a true big man, tried to bulk him up more, and that wasn't Chris's game really. But then Kruger used him kind of like out on the point on defense, and really used his athleticism more. And Gandy had a fantastic senior year there in Kruger's first season. So I thought that was cool to see. And then Lon did such a good job with that team. One of my best memory of that season was when Illinois beat Michigan State at Assembly Hall to clinch a share of the Big Ten championship. I believe they clinched it with the game, but because they tied with Michigan State for the title. And Mateen Cleaves was a freshman. I remember that game. I had worked out before the game. And I sat second row there, and I remember that was still to me is the loudest I've ever heard Assembly Hall, just like the sounds cascading down from C-section down on the court. And I remember being exhausted in the game. I was like dripping with sweat. I was hoarse from yelling. My shoulder, I'd worked out, and my shoulder was like kind of thrown out. I was sore. I felt like I'd almost played the game. And that was just an awesome game my senior year, being able to watch them and cheer on that team.
Yeah. Well, what's funny too about Turner is him and Notary went to the same high school, and and Turner ended up being something that they weren't expecting, so that
absolutely. Kevin was kind of just a throw in a little way with Ryan Notary coming in. And it was interesting, my senior year at Bradley Bourbonnais, in the Lincoln Way Holiday Tournament, my high school, I wasn't on the basketball team, but a bunch of my friends were, and we played St. Martin de Porres in the semifinals of the game with G as a senior that year when he won Mr. Basketball, and actually beat St. Martin de Porres and in the semis, and then played. That was an awesome game. One of my best friends, he was 6'8" and went on to play at Illinois Wesleyan. His brother was 2 years younger. He was 6'6", and he went to play out at Wyoming. I remember they did a pretty good job defending G that game, and we won just by like one or 2 points. There was a shot at the end to try and win it or tie it from St. Martin de Porres, and they missed. But in the championship game, then we played Simeon of that tournament, lost to Simeon, and I remember Notary. Everyone, Bryant was a huge recruit that year. I remember him in that game vividly. He dunked on my buddy, the 6'8" guy. But I don't even really have a memory of Kevin Turner in that game, to be honest with you. And then Turner committed to Illinois later that year. I was like, geez, I don't really even remember him that well. And then, as you pointed out, Kevin was the one who ended up having the fantastic career. Bryant was, didn't quite live up to expectations at Illinois and went off to UIC and had a decent career there. But Turner really, he developed as much as just about any player I think we've seen over the course of 4 years.
Yeah, I agree. So then as we move into the 2000s, you guys fouled out and things like that. So I guess I would say, do you have a happiest memory as a fan? And don't count 05 because that's too easy.
Right.
And do you have a most frustrating memory as an Illinois fan?
That's
to me,
question.
that team, that game's up there for me, like the Arizona game.
I mean, honestly, I think I have to go with that game as the biggest frustration as well, too. To be that close from making a Final Four and for all those fouls to go that way. And it was, that season, Illinois and Arizona had that incredible rivalry they developed. And Illinois, they faced each other in the championship game of the Maui Classic early in the season. Arizona won that one, and then Arizona and Illinois played at the United Center. I covered that game when I was working for the Daily Times in Ottawa at the UC there around Christmas, and that was incredible with Lute Olson calling Lucas Johnson crazy and everything in that game, and
Everything was set up for us to get screwed that game. I mean, it was
because that was really he started laying the groundwork for the fouls that were all called in the Elite Eight game there in December. Honestly, close game. I'll never forget being in the post game in the interview room there at United Center, waiting for Lute to come in, and he had just walked in, and Digger Phelps was in the room, and he I don't know who he was talking to, but he had the door open, yelling at someone down the hallway at the top of his lungs, and everyone's like, Digger, what are you doing? Be quiet. The press conference is trying to start. He's laughing and yelling at someone. Finally closed the door, and then Lute goes on his whole rant about Illinois, and I still remember he kept pronouncing the word skirmish, squirmish. He kept calling it skirmishes the whole press conference. It was such a memorable press conference, such a memorable game, and for them, but he kind of laid the groundwork, I guess, for where things went in that Elite Eight game. That Illinois was just a bunch of physical guys and a bunch of thugs out there just taking pot shots at and it was it's got to be the most frustrating game. And the interesting thing is now I became good friends with Robert Archibald. Rest in peace. Lucas, I know Lucas. I know Marcus. Marcus is a Facebook friend of mine. He and I have met a little bit. I talked to him years ago at a tailgate and talked about how I was there for the first Peoria Manual Championship at Assembly Hall, and we talked about that. And Marcus and I are Facebook friends. We interact a little bit. He's a good guy. But I've gotten to know some of those players on the team from then, and I think to me that's got to stand out as the most frustrating game. With best memories, honestly, one of those best memories was that game I was talking about senior year with beating Michigan State at Assembly Hall. And there's been a lot of great moments as well too. Just a couple of the bragging rights games I was at personally when Frankie was playing, just was awesome to see. That was a joy. And I think when Illinois before the 05 season, when they really started turning things on in 03-04, that was a fun run to Sweet 16 as well too. When things really started clicking for that bunch, was awesome as well too. So there's been a lot of great memories. There's been a lot of frustrating ones too, probably over the years, but that's got to stand out from the 01 Elite Eight.
Great. Well, back to Midge, because you were talking about being in that press room. You got any? How about any stories from when you were in the press room, as far as questions you asked, or just anything kind of out of the ordinary you saw in one of those press conferences or anything that sticks out?
I didn't really cover pro and major college and pro games that much when I was a sports writer. I covered a lot of high school. I covered some junior college. I did see Sean Marion play for Vincennes against Parkland. That was cool back in the day. Back when he was playing JUCO. One thing that does stand out, though, I did come down when Illinois hosted the Bears during the 02 season. I did cover a few games that year, and I remember having a really interesting interaction with David Terrell in the locker room. Just his personality was just out there. He was an entertaining guy to talk to. It was impossible to really ask him a question. He just kind of talked at you, and it was just interesting interacting with him. I'm going
to test my memory here, and I might be completely wrong, but was he the wide receiver out of Michigan?
He was the wide receiver out of Michigan. Indeed.
That's a good pull.
You got it. And he was a mercurial personality, just a big personality to say the least. And it's just interesting interacting with him. He thought a lot of himself. I'll just say that he had a very high opinion of himself. Whether he played well or not, he thought a lot about himself.
Yeah. Well, he's a wide receiver. They could.
Yeah, that's true. It kind of comes with the territory, I think. There's a little bit of a diva
Right.
aspect if you're an NFL wide receiver.
Right. My favorite players, like I'm looking around here now, like I have stuff. It's just the wide. If you get a wide receiver that just doesn't say a lot and just does his job, like your Calvin Johnson, Larry Fitzgerald types, stuff like that. Like those are just they got to be a dream to NFL head coach.
Those are few and far between.
I know exactly. All right, so let's move on with Illinois a little bit forward here. We won't go through the lean years here, but how about things now? Like, how encouraged were you by last year? How encouraged are you by what they've done this offseason, which is basically just free agency and it's all at auction at this point, it seems like. But how are you feeling about the program now as a whole?
I mean, I love what Brad Underwood's done with the program. I was always on board with Underwood hire. I know some people weren't pleased right away. I saw what I thought he was doing, that he was really tearing a program down to its studs. I didn't think there was a toughness with the Grossiers there, and I think Brad took on a tough job right away. He maybe could have tried to win a few more games his first couple of years but I don't think that was what he was trying to do. I think he was really trying to instill a toughness and a whole new mentality for the program, and it took a little while to get started. And what he has going on now, I just think he's got Illinois back in the upper echelon of college basketball, and it looks like he has them there, solidified to stay in the upper echelon of college basketball. Just with he's bringing in, his coaching hire has been fantastic. He's bringing in European players. He's bringing in top preps. He's really the corner of the transfer market in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
I've got a lot of feelings and mixed feelings in some ways about the way the game has evolved with the whole NIL and transfer. I think it's kind of chaotic, but
Yeah.
I'd rather. I guess what I would say is that I'm happy that Illinois seems to have a head coach and a coaching staff that gets it and understands how to work this market and really maximize it. I see some other coaches out there like Tom Izzo really doesn't seem like
He's not adapting well, but
yeah, he doesn't like it, and maybe Underwood doesn't like it, but he gets it. Like, this is the game now, and if you're going to win, you've got to figure out how to do it. And I think they brought in some incredible transfers. Marcus Damask was amazing this past year. Terrence Shannon Jr. was an amazing addition when they brought him to transfer. I wasn't anticipating so much turnover this season, but I think that the additions they brought in have been really smart, and I think they're also bringing in guys that hopefully aren't just one-year guys, and kind of building. I think the team has a chance to be really good this year. I think they may start out, take a little while to gel, but I think there's a really high ceiling with this group. But if they can largely stay intact for the following year, I think that could have an extremely high ceiling. So, and it'll be interesting moving forward too, because the COVID years are done for guys now, and high school recruiting might become a little more important because there's not going to be as many transfers out there. But at the same time, I think Illinois is operating with an NIL. I think they've got a very competitive NIL budget, and they've got coaches who really are able to attract these guys and have all sorts of relationships. They'll have their pick of a lot of the litter, I think, of the top transfers out there too. I think Illinois has become a really appealing destination for a lot of kids.
Yeah, I do too. I feel like I don't know. I just kind of feel like the whole they just feel a little bit more secure because it's like they're not. Some teams go out there just to make a big splash and be a preseason ranked, blah blah blah. But I feel like they're kind of to the point, that whole staff. I mean, obviously Chester left and Antique was in, which is great. Best of luck to Chester. Great, but I feel
Absolutely.
I feel like they're very secure in knowing, just kind of targeting people that they think will fit what they want to do. And if people like the guys from overseas, if people haven't heard, they don't care. It's just like we want, we know what we want to get accomplished here. So I feel good about it. I mean, to be honest, the turnover, I think, is crazy. It's crazy. Like, I have a 7-year-old, so it's like it's tough because he gets attached to one kid and they're gone.
Sure.
But at the same time, he gets over it. I just told him, like, hey, we're just rooting for, fine. We just want we're rooting for Illinois, so whatever. But it is so different from when we were growing up, and you could get attached to a guy for 4 years. But that's just one little thing there. But I like what they're doing a lot, and I like how again they're just trying to fit guys or get guys that I think will fit what they're trying to do, and they're not worried about where they're ranked or this and that, whatever, because he kind of solidifying the whole thing. And yeah, I mean, I feel really good about it. Who is it's not in front of me right now, and I'm having kind of a brain fart. Who's the kid that is down? We're down to his top 5, and he's like a 5-star recruit that might, that the people are talking about right now.
Yeah, why am I just suddenly blanking on his name as well too? Hold on.
I can't remember, but
It's I was just reading about him just a little bit ago. Now you just mentioned it, went out of my head as well too. But he's a guy who may reclassify from
not in your head because I just babbled for 5 minutes and you probably forgot. But I was listening to Piper talk about him, and apparently he's so good that they're just gonna figure it out. But at the same time, to me, it's kind of like if you're happy with what you have right here and the chemistry and things like that, then I'm good with that too. But this kid apparently is so good that they're trying to get him, and they'll just figure it out if they get him. But I can't. Yeah,
It's Will Riley. I knew it was Will
there
something. His last name popped out of my head, but it sounds promising for Illinois with him if he's going to reclassify to 2024. I'm not generally a huge fan of reclassifications. I feel like you come in too young to college, you might kind of struggle. I think Colin Boswell did that a little bit. He's got a ton of experience. It's gonna be great for Illinois this year, but his freshman year, he wasn't exactly fantastic at Arizona. He was young, and Riley, but he's 5-star. He's supposed to really be talented, and I think you can bring in a player like him. You figure out how it all works together with everything as well too. I think the ceiling. With or without him, I think they've got a really strong bunch, and I feel like Underwood and the staff probably learned a lot. At least I hope they did. I guess we need to see how this season plays out with this whole new bunch. But from 2 years ago, that wasn't a great mix of personalities, I think, on the team. And I think they were more mindful about really high character guys coming in as well, too, who aren't just out for themselves, and bringing in, Quincy Guerrier and Damask last year. And that obviously worked out great. So I'm hopeful that the lessons they learned from the prior year and then this past year are translating into this group of guys that they brought together. And to your point, I think they know the kind of guys they want, whether it's someone from Europe or a high school player like Morez Johnson or whoever it is that they're bringing, or it's Ben Hunmerkhaus, who I'm really excited about. I think he might be another Damask in some ways, like a really highly talented, kind of overlooked player. I think they've learned a lot about the mixed personalities, and I think a lot of credit's got to be given to Underwood himself too, because you just look for the past few years with that staff. I think he's had really good assistant coaches throughout, but with the turnover that they've had, loses all his coaches just a few years ago and replaces them with excellent coaches, and then Chester leaves this year, and I wish him the absolute best with his opportunity. I think Chester's a great guy, and I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. But you bring Antigua back in, for that, which is
that was a big get there.
Just a grand slam. I mean, he's arguably the best assistant coach in college basketball. I mean, you can make a case for it, I think. So it's just, but Underwood's been the constant there. As long as he's there, I think the rudder's steady, and he's going to put strong guys beside him, and that's going to trickle down to the rest of the program as well too.
There are like a lot of those transfers. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Mm-hmm.
Okay, got you. Just got real quiet. A lot of those transfers too this year that they got are young. So again, like you were saying, if they'll stay for more than a year and be patient and not want to leave after the first 6 games of the year if they don't get to play enough, like a lot of kids are. But they are young. So if maybe these transfers that are come in, if you get them to stay too for more than 1 year together, then you're really got something going there. So Hunmerkhaus is he's kind of the exception really in this.
Right.
Last year they were all older like him. This year he's kind of like the only one, and the rest of them are younger kids. So it's exciting, I think. But nobody. It's just year to year. You're not gonna know what the heck's going on. I mean, as far as like what each team's gonna bring, things like that. You just get to enjoy it and watch and see how.
It's kind of what you got. Like you said, it's free agency largely now. And, the way I kind of look at it is the nature of college basketball has always been, college sports, period, is always been that players are there for a finite amount of time. They're not going to be there forever. It's not like pros where you might have a guy play 10, 15, who knows, maybe even like 20 years or something if it's a baseball team possibly. So people, the turnover's natural. Before you could count on a guy being there 4 years probably and like be able to develop that relationship. But when it comes down to it, ultimately, I'm rooting for the laundry, I guess. Ultimately, like I'm an Illini fan, and whether a guy's there for 1 year like Marcus Damask or he's there for 4 years like Coleman Hawkins.
I want banners. That's all.
Exactly. That's what I want too. And bring in the best players, whether I see them for a long time or a little bit of time. If whatever group it is can get to another Final Four, win a national championship, I don't care. I want to see. I'll be excited about the players that are there and that can do that. And I don't. That's what I want to see. Get the best mix of players, and you do have these opportunities to bring in these immediate impact guys to fill immediate needs, which is a big asset if you know what you're doing and you've got the ability. And Illinois seems like they know what they're doing. They've got the ability to do that.
Right. It's like I love Malcolm Hill, but give me 1 year of Damask going to a Final Eight.
Exactly.
Yeah. I feel like also these kids get so impatient and everything. So I'm gonna tell you what I would consider doing, and just tell me if I'm an idiot or not. Okay. One thing I would do, and again, I have no idea how you would make this work or whatever, but if it gets too out of control, if there's any way you could cap it, eventually I try to cap it. And then maybe if it gets too out of control, say like, okay, you transfer once, you can play the next year. If you transfer the second time, you got to sit out a year or something, just so it doesn't, just in case it gets too crazy. Now,
I don't disagree at all. I wish there were rules. Then it seems like I don't think the courts are going to let college have those rules anymore, from the best I can gather with the way everything's gone. But I agree. I would prefer the one-time transfer, ideally, honestly. And if the way you just said it, like the second time you have to sit out a season, I don't think that's unreasonable. I've thought for a long time that, like baseball, which I believe it's still the case, if you want to get drafted out of high school, I also would let kids get drafted out of high school personally too, because I think if you want to go pro, go ahead and go pro. But like in baseball, if you go to college, you're there for 3 years or until you turn 21, and then you're draft eligible again. I always thought that was a good thing with baseball. And
right.
Like you've got a choice. You can go right away, or if you go, you're making a commitment. But there doesn't seem to be any commitment. I was just chatting with a friend about this week. I thought one way that maybe this could be capped, that there could be some type of limits on this is if there's some type of collective bargaining agreement that's ultimately developed for college athletes. Maybe that does happen, because it's all moving to a more basically professional sports, with what's going on right now.
Well,
maybe something like that does emerge. I don't know.
But like high school kids going to the draft, they're not going to do that now because they can make so much more money in college than, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
So you're not going to see kids jumping from high school unless they go, well, now they can go overseas too. There's all kinds of options, but if a kid can make $500,000 as a freshman in college,
yeah.
They're going to go to college.
Yeah, and I've always been a fan of letting kids make money off their name and image and be able to get advertising opportunities. I don't fully understand how it all works, because it doesn't really seem like it's fully based off that now. It just seems like it's kind of like a straight payday, and then it's kind of figured out how you earn your payday. And I don't really know if all these guys fully get what they think they're going to get to. It seems like there's a lot of murkiness to exactly how the NIL deals work out. And to be honest, I'm not privy to precisely how it all unfolds. But
right.
if you're a big enough name, if you can make money off your name. And I like this, I would have loved to see Coleman Hawkins back for a fifth year, but also I think he's earned an opportunity to go off and get, if he can get a bigger payday somewhere for a fifth year. More credit to him. He's got a bonus year, take advantage of it, and I don't hold that against him by any means. I mean, basically, it's the same thing that Marcus Damas did last year. Gave 4 good years at SIU, and they came to Illinois, and I certainly didn't hold that against Marcus. And
Yeah,
I'm not going to hold that against Coleman to do it as well.
Right. That's another thing too. Eventually, they've got to drop that 5th COVID year, I would imagine. I mean,
This is it. This is the last year with it.
last year.
Yeah, so there'll be no more after this year. It's done now. Once everyone settles this year, there will be no more of those fifth year guys. There may still be who knows, fifth year guy if like NCAA is hard to figure out these days. They might give a guy a fifth year for who knows what. They could have given Damas a 6th year, it sounds like, because he was injured a lot of his sophomore year, but they didn't. So there may be some guys that get random fifth years, but the whole COVID year will be done. This is the last class.
Yeah. It's just funny though. Remember when we were kids, it was like if somebody transferred, that was like a big deal.
Oh, right.
It was just, you didn't see it hardly at all.
No, exactly.
Yeah, but
Now it's now it's just everywhere. And we were talking about Illinois keeping this team intact for 2 years. I hope they can keep most of them intact, but the reality is there's going to be guys that transfer out next year.
Oh, yeah.
And there's going to be guys that transfer in. I mean, it's just almost a given. It'd be shocking if there wasn't some turnover again, because I think you're just going to see it basically every year now. Just the state of affairs with college hoops.
If you can keep, I think now if you can keep 3 out of 5, you consider it successful. Except there's a lot of times where the coaches are trying to upgrade and they don't necessarily care if you stay. You know what I mean? Because they're trying to upgrade the roster, and if they think that they can bring somebody in better than what you are, then they'll kind of pave the way for you to get out anyway. So it's just nuts, I mean, and the dumbest rule I think is that the fact that kids could start announcing transferring during the tournament this past.
Yeah, that I don't understand at all. That was bizarre to me this year. Like you're penalizing the teams that are going far in the tournament, or you're making the coaches do like ridiculous responsibilities.
Yeah.
They're trying to coach to win a championship, but they also got to worry about recruiting and not missing the boat on transfers. And that window should not open until after the championship game. I think that's just like a no-brainer, and that's not going to hurt anybody if that's the case. Yeah, that's a dumb rule.
Yeah, that's one of the worst ones I've come across in a long time. But all right, well.
Okay, so we're going to stop it right there. And again, part 2 of this episode will come out Thursday. And Dave and I talk all Cardinals Cubs, going all the way back to our childhoods, all the way to the present, just like we did with Illinois. So it was a lot of fun. We're going to cut this one off here. Make sure you tune in for part 2 on Thursday. And that's that.